Right now, America and Israel are the strong horse, and the Iranian regime are most definitely not.
Hello and welcome back to Spectator TV. Today we're going to be talking about what might happen next in Iran, because the cover of this week's magazine, War and Peace, has two articles by Tom Gross and Peter Frankman looking at the results of Trump's big bombing of Iran at the weekend. I'm actually joined by Tom Gross now, who is a commentator on the Middle East and an insightful writer for The Spectator. Tom, thank you for coming in. Your article expresses hope for regime change in Iran. How do you think that might play out?
Well, first of all, I don't want to get too optimistic. What I said is that regime change may well be coming. I'll get into that in a second. And there are voices in Britain, America, and elsewhere that are fearful of it because of the experiences, in Iraq and Afghanistan and maybe Libya and elsewhere. And I understand why there are those fears. But in Iran, it's a very different situation where the regime has really low support, maybe 10 or 15%. There's been a whole series of counter-revolutionary protests, the most famous ones being the Green Revolution of 2009 and the Women Life Freedom protests against the headscarves a year or two ago. And also the Iranians are quite well disposed to the West as a people. I'm not talking about the regime. So it's a very different situation than trying to go in with an army and invade and occupy like happened in Iraq or Afghanistan. Now, how would this come about? With difficulty, because you don't need that many militiamen in the Revolutionary Guards and the various internal security forces to keep control. If you look at, North Korea, you may only have 5 or 10% of people supporting the regime, but that's enough to keep order in the country. But what we've just seen in Iran is a fantastic weakening. There's been a lot of focus on the American airstrikes on Fordow and the other two prime sites for enriching uranium, but there hasn't been that much media focus on what Israel did for the whole 12 days, which is really disrupt the regime in all kinds of ways, including we now know there were Israeli commanders on the ground doing various acts of sabotage. The communications networks were taken out and all kinds of stuff went on. So I'm not predicting there's going to be regime change in the next week or two, but I think there will be down the line. And I think what we saw in what Donald Trump has called the 12-day war will be a significant moment that leads to the regime change. And one more thing, if I may add, it may come in a kind of counter-revolutionary popular uprising of the kind we saw in the Women Life Freedom movement. But of course, it may come with some general or some military figure staging a coup, and one hopes that general will be more amenable to repair relations with the rest of the world, in particular the West. Or third possibility, it will come internally, a little bit like with the collapse of the Soviet Union, where Gorbachev had, perestroika. He had it kind of imploded from within. That's also a possibility. At any rate, I'm going to stick my neck out and say that the regime will not be with us for so much longer. And we as the West should be encouraging anything that leads to the end of the regime, not trying to prop it up, which Barack Obama as president was condemned for supposedly doing in the 2009 protests.
Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel has achieved its objectives in the now called 12-day war. And yet it did seem very much as though one of the objectives is regime change in Iran, and that has not happened yet. And in fact, sources inside Iran are concerned, pro-Western sources inside Iran are concerned that the next few months will be particularly brutal, and that the regime, far from being toppled, is in fact going to exert a more tyrannical and stronger grip on any dissidents within Iran.
Well, first of all, Netanyahu didn't actually state aim of this operation, the 12-day war, was regime change. He did issue a couple of video messages encouraging a change of government in Iran, but Israel's aims, as far as I'm aware, like the United States' aims, was very much directed at the infrastructure of the nuclear weapons program and what fed in it. And of course, there was also assassination of the head of Revolutionary Guards and the head of the army, but Israel didn't hit political targets. They hit military and some scientific targets, some scientific personnel involved with the scientists that were killed were specifically those who were working on the weaponization of the nuclear program to move towards a nuclear weapon. Netanyahu, no one stated a regime would fall just from this 12-day war. And you're right that there may be a crackdown, but there have already been fantastic crackdowns and things go in waves. One of the things that's been terribly misreported in the UK has been Israel blowing open the gates of Evin prison, which is really a horrendous prison, one of the world's worst centers of torture. Israel, unlike as has been reported in The Guardian and BBC, did not bomb the prison. They blew open the gates, and quite a lot of the political prisoners have apparently escaped. And also, if you speak to Iranian political prisoners who survived Evin and are now in exile in the West, they said it was the most joyous moment of their life to see Israel destroy elements of this. So the regime is weakened. It's in chaos. They don't know who to trust. The Israeli intelligence agency, the Mossad, so thoroughly penetrated Iran that there may be people at high levels within the regime who the regime now can't trust. Then they can't trust their communication networks. The bureaucracy will take time to rebuild. The militias are weakened. So yes, in the very, very immediate term, they have been arresting people and indeed executed 3 people yesterday morning, the Iranian regime, on supposed charges of spying for Israel. I very much doubt those people were involved in any such thing. They were quick arrests by the regime of probably for other reasons, and they've just, claimed they're spies. But yes, there may be a very short-term crackdown, but in fact, the regime is weakened also in the eyes of the people. It's shown itself to be a bit of a paper tiger. And the last thing I would say is when America hit them, what did they do? They did a kind of piece of theater by actually hitting open ground near an American base in Qatar, tipping off the Americans, and they were praying that no American would even be injured, because actually they wanted a kind of semi-face changing method of trying to reach a ceasefire. They're on the back burner. They are now shown to be in Middle East parlance the weak horse, not the strong horse, which is a common phrase in the Middle East. Where Bin Laden, for example, used it after 9/11. He said, "We are the strong horse. America's the weak horse, and it's only natural that people flock to the strong horse." Right now, America and Israel are the strong horse, and the Iranian regime are most definitely not.
Do you think people within the Trump administration and people who support Trump's strikes on Iran have been a little too hasty to call it a triumph? I know that all of Trump's cabinet have expressed their anger about the military intelligence leaks suggesting preliminary intelligence suggesting that perhaps Iran's nuclear sites were not entirely destroyed. But nonetheless, it does seem as though Iran's capacity to build a nuclear bomb cannot just be simply knocked out with one strike. They can always regenerate as long as the regime is in place, or as long as Iran has a government that wants a nuclear weapon. So do you think the Americans, and Trump in particular, has been too quick to claim mission accomplished and try to move on?
If you enjoy what we do here at Spectator TV, then why not subscribe to the magazine as well? Right now, you can get 12 weeks for just £12, and we'll throw in a free bottle of Pimm's plus a Spectator picture. Go to spectator.co.uk/summer25. This is a UK-only offer.
The answer is yes and no. First of all, Trump, as is of his way doesn't say things with nuance or moderation. So he said, we've completely obliterated, I think he said, we completely and totally and utterly obliterated Fordo. Now, no military or intelligence figure would use language like that. It's not a term they'd use. And clearly, it will actually take weeks or months to get a full assessment of the damage to Fordo. You can only get some first glance from satellite images that people will have to go in. So no, of course it's a bit triumphant of Trump. He's he likes a winner, and he probably instructed his whole cabinet to do so. On the other hand, those people in the media picking up on some very low-level leaked out of context paragraphs from some initial intelligence report suggesting the strikes only set back the nuclear program a few months, they're even more disingenuous in that I think we can say for certain it's been set back years, not months. But, and here's another thing, Trump wants to claim the credit for himself. Most of the actual setback was done by Israel. Remember, the American involvement was a matter of minutes where they did those three airstrikes. Israel, for 24/7 for 12 days, was hitting all kinds of other targets connected to the nuclear program. Things like the Arak heavy water reactor. I think there's something in Park Chin where they put together centrifuges. There are many, many different elements and stages to having a nuclear weapons program. And these have been disrupted at every level. So even if there is some enriched uranium that's been hidden or buried under Fordo, this is only one element of the program. And I think, yes, Trump shouldn't say mission accomplished, but nor should those who either politically oppose Trump in the US or politically oppose the very notion of America being involved these days. It should only be strictly America first. Or media that never want to give Trump any kind of victory, like the Financial Times in London this morning, at least online, their main headline is, off the top of my head, European governments say mission, the strike was hardly, the nuclear program was hardly hit at all, or words to that effect. And this is simply not true. I've spoken since I saw that FT report to people who are former senior people in military intelligence in more than one country and some intelligence sources, and they say, no, it's been very seriously disrupted, the program. And it's not so easy to reconstitute the bureaucracy. It's not so easy to bring in and train nuclear scientists who know how to weaponize the process of enriched uranium. Israel, as I understand, has killed 14 of the leading 15 people. It's years of training. It's not so easy just to bring in someone from, I don't know, North Korea or Pakistan to help Iran and talk about the regime bringing someone in. But language difficulties, all kinds of difficulties. It won't be easy to reconstitute. And if I might just say one further thing, Israel bombed in 1981 Saddam Hussein's nuclear program in Osirak, and in 2007 they bombed in Syria Bashar Assad's nuclear program. Now, both of those programs were much less developed stage than the Iranian one was. But one thing we have in common is the naysayers after Israel bombed Saddam Hussein's, who said, oh, Saddam will have a new nuclear program within a few months or year or two, and likewise in Assad's case. But Saddam never did manage to rebuild his nuclear program, and nor did Assad, as far as we're aware. So, I think what the West or Israel, America have bought themselves a number of years, and I believe in those years, the regime may be overthrown or may itself voluntarily change the way that Gorbachev changed the Soviet Union.
It's often said by commentators, particularly in this country, I've noticed, that Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states they won't say it out loud, but they'll be thrilled at Israel's military brilliance against Iran. That's certainly not what they say publicly, and I think it's probably a bit more complicated than that, is it not? Because I think there are important power players in the Gulf states who are very concerned about what Israel is doing and have expressed their concerns. And that, in fact, the Abraham Accords, which have been this incredible coming together of Israel with some of the Gulf states, may be imperiled by Netanyahu's seeming recklessness in the Middle East, what they regard as Netanyahu's recklessness.
Okay, so sorry to break it to you, but it's quite the opposite is the case. Yesterday it was revealed that the Syrian National Security Advisor is holding direct talks with the Israeli National Security Advisor in Abu Dhabi, that both Syria and Lebanon may join the Abraham Accords even before Saudi Arabia. And from Israel's point of view, this is very important because Syria and Lebanon border Israel to the north. Israel has four countries that border it. It already has peace agreements with Egypt and Jordan. Obviously, there's the Palestinian question, which I'll just leave aside for a moment. But the Syria and Lebanon will be a major step in bringing peace to the region, and also even Qatar, which is the closest one to closest country to Iran. The Qataris play everybody. They own Paris Saint-Germain, they host the Olympics, they invest in New York, they give $400 million luxury flying palace palatial jets to Donald Trump for use by the Trump Presidential Library after he's no longer in office. But I think the Qataris, as I mentioned before about this phrase, the strong horse, the strong horse is Israel and America, and I suspect they'll distance themselves from Iran. Now, we know that the Arab states were happy that Israel did this because they assisted in small ways. For example, Syria cleared its airspace. And remember, officially, Syria is at a state of war with Israel. It cleared its airspace to allow Israeli jets to fly through it. Likewise, Saudi also was involved in certain things. They also helped logistically shoot down some of the drones that the Iranian regime was sending at Israel during this 12-day war. So there was some low-level cooperation. Now, why aren't they more public about it? Because, they have internal issues from Islamists, from people that are, more pro-Palestinian or even pro-Hamas and so on. And most of these countries are not ready to be too public about working with Israel. But in fact, the Abraham Accords have never looked healthier. And I'm sure everyone knows what these are, but I just want to remind people, why Abraham? Because the idea was that you have the three monotheistic religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, as a kind of commonality of having Abraham as a kind of father figure. And the idea was to find the commonality between these groups rather than the differences. And I should also point out the Abraham Accords, particularly with the Morocco and the UAE that Trump and Netanyahu in 2020, have been incredibly successful, more than Israel's peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan. For example, during this entire war in Gaza since October 7th, Morocco and the UAE have increased ties culturally, economically, diplomatically with Israel, whereas the move in Europe is basically to boycott and distance themselves from Israel.
You were bold enough to predict regime change in Iran. When did you say? Did you say within a year?
No, and I'm not predicting it. Just to be clear, I say we should welcome and encourage it.
No, you did. You did. You said you'll stick your neck out.
Okay, but not within a year.
Okay.
What I said is I don't think this regime will be around for a long time. I'll tell you another reason I don't think so, because they haven't got nuclear weapons, they're not so entrenched. It's very, very difficult to overthrow the North Korean government, which is one of the prime reasons the North Korean regime wanted nuclear weapons. Who can now challenge them? Likewise, Russia and Ukraine. I've said from the beginning that Ukraine cannot beat Russia because Russia's got nuclear weapons and they've always got that dangling in the background. And the whole of Western policy towards Russia, Ukraine, has to be viewed in the context that, Russia has the world's biggest nuclear arsenal. Now, because the Iranians do not yet have a nuclear weapon, that makes regime change more possible. And yes, I'm sticking my neck out to say it will happen, not necessarily within a year I can't predict the future. I'm thinking that it's more likely now than it was a month ago, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen right now. And what I'm saying is Western governments, including Britain, should be encouraging this, should be giving support to the opposition and dissidents. They shouldn't be all nervous about it and saying, oh, we don't want to rock the boat. In a little bit like with Assad, I had debates with people about Syria who said, oh, no, the devil we know, keep Assad in power. Oh, my God, these other people used to be in Al-Qaeda. And I will stick my neck out again and say I will give a tentative encouraging signs about the new Syrian government, even though al-Shara, the president, is a former member of Al-Qaeda. I think he's being a pragmatist. I think he's moving to the right direction. And the vast majority of Syrians, life is better now than it was under Assad. And it will be this. Of course, there are problems, and we should keep an eye on the Syrian regime. But likewise in Iran, the vast majority of Iranians will benefit from a change in government, and I think it will happen.
Well, I was going to ask, are you going to be bold enough to predict that Saudi Arabia and Israel will sign some sort of accord, maybe an Abraham Accord?
Yes, not only bold enough, I think Donald Trump he's the one on a timetable, because as you know, because you're an expert on American politics, we have midterms already next year. And, there's no guarantee that the Republicans will still hold both houses of Congress. And Trump very much wants his nice big photo op and White House ceremony. And I think it's on Trump's timetable. There's another factor. There are elections in Israel next year at some point. I think the end date is next autumn, but they'll happen before. And it will be quite hard to do a Saudi-Israel peace treaty when they're in the middle of election campaigns, or there's an interim government or coalition building. These coalition building in Israel with all the political parties can take months. So if Trump wants to have a nice ceremony on the White House lawn, he's better off doing it before any election in Israel. And quite frankly, Netanyahu, presuming he wants to stand again, which he might not, but that's another story, will also want to do it before an election. And even if Netanyahu doesn't win an election, I'm sure he'd like a nice picture for the photo books, because this is the big one. Saudi Arabia are essentially leaders of the Arab Islamic world. It's where Mecca and Medina are housed. And we know, if you look back, for people who remember Menachem Begin, another hardline Likud Israeli prime minister, no one else really remembers anything much about him apart from that victory where he's holding Anwar Sadat's hand with Jimmy Carter, and it's the Egyptian-Israeli Camp David peace accords, and now he's remembered in history for all time. And apparently the Abraham Accords to date with the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco and Sudan, with all due respect to those countries, that wasn't quite enough to be an iconic moment in the history books. MBS, for better or worse, and is a complicated figure, and Netanyahu and Trump, I'm predicting that even if they are not graced with the Nobel Peace Prize, that will be a photo that's taught forevermore in history and other classes. And they all know that, these leaders, and they want it.
Tom Gross, thank you very much for coming on to Spectator TV.
You're welcome. Have a good day.